Uh, if you can just go ahead and go down the line and introduce yourselves and tell everybody a little bit about your businesses. Start with you, Wayne.
Sure. Hi, my name is Wayne Vaughan. I'm the founder and CEO of Tyrion. We created a platform called Chainpoint that allows you to link data to a transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain and get back a timestamp proof. Companies use this for things like data integrity, audit trails, things like that.
Stephen Pear, co-founder and CEO of BitPay. We've been around since 2011, processing payments, building tools for companies to make it easy for them to process a blockchain payment.
Brian Hoffman, CEO of OB1. We work primarily on OpenBazaar, and I'm sure I've probably talked to all of you way too long at the table, more than you wanted to hear about it. So,
Paul Puey, CEO and co-founder of Edge. We've been around since 2014, building at first a mobile Bitcoin wallet and now a security platform for dApps to help secure private keys for end users, as well as our own wallet, Edge Wallet, which uses that SDK for multi-assets, multi-blockchain, as well as integrated exchange services inside of our app.
All right, so you're all here because you build businesses on the premise of bringing value with crypto. So could you tell us exactly how your business does that? Starting with you, Wayne.
Sure. So you probably noticed in the past couple of years there's been a lot of talk about blockchain applications and things. And in a lot of cases, what people are trying to simply do is to prove something. They want to be able to prove the integrity and timestamp of information. They want to be able to create an audit trail for something like a business process. And we created some tools that have made it very easy to do that. You can take a hash of some arbitrary data, send it to the Chainpoint software, and get back a timestamp. And we make it very easy for people to do this, and we make it easy for others to integrate with our software.
At BitPay, we build tools to make it very easy for companies to conduct blockchain payments. So whether that's a tool that integrates with your e-commerce platform, selling products and services online, or whether that's billing tools where companies bill other companies. We build software to make
yeah, I mean, I think through OpenBazaar, we are probably one of the earliest dApps, like true dApps in the whole ecosystem. Not Ethereum dApp, but just a decentralized application that's really at the app layer. I think a lot of people are building infrastructure that powers the Bitcoin, and crypto ecosystem, and we're trying to educate and let consumers use it on a daily basis, create utility for Bitcoin, which we think feeds into the value growth of all of that, right? Like if you're using these currencies on a daily basis, you're creating economic value, and hopefully the coins that you believe in are starting to go up as well.
So the real differentiating factor and what we feel like we're bringing as value add to the ecosystem is really simplifying to the point of making invisible key management. So for most people that are using non-custodial wallets, they've probably hit the experience of having to deal with either saving files, writing down seeds, and general backup and encryption of their keys. So we've built both in our wallet the ability for people to do what feels very familiar, which is create an account and log in while still having non-custodial access to funds. And then expanding that and now offering that as a platform with that other dApps can incorporate, other tools and apps that are accessing blockchains, because that is the one commonality across accessing a blockchain for any purpose, is that you still need a private key to talk to that blockchain. So offering that as an SDK to some partner apps such as Augur, Endorse, Anthem Gold, Ember Fund, which appreciate the ability to give that user experience to their users, and really try to help mass adoption by eliminating a lot of that complexity, which we define as making it familiar to what people already do today when they use a mobile app.
So crypto is still generally written off by mainstream technologists. It's seen some adoption in these 10 years that we've had it, but that seems still to be the case. So what do you think are some reasons for that? And how do you navigate that as a roadblock to growing a business involved in crypto?
Yeah.
Well, I don't agree with the premise of the question. I think most mainstream technologists actually haven't written it off. In fact, quite the opposite. So Yeah, I disagree with the premise of it.
Okay.
So, I mean, I guess I can kind of answer. I mean, I think your business is like kind of one of those bridging technologies, right? It's like, how do we get people from place A to place B and like building tools that allow people to kind of usher them into crypto? You know, from the side of the community where we're building something that's like only on the very far reaching side, like you got to be a real early adopter to kind of believe in what we're doing and use it and want to play with it. I think that's something that people are not wrapping their head around yet. Like, I just don't think that they're mentally there. So it's not that they've written it off. I think they've written off the idea that Bitcoin is a get-rich thing for this year, but that may come back next year. You know, so I think in terms of just like the real power of crypto, I don't think people have even gotten there yet to understand what it really is.
All right. So let me rephrase that a little bit. Not so much completely written it off, but there's a sort of endemic dismissiveness when it comes to services that seek to replicate or improve upon legacy systems.
You know, blockchain is a database technology, right? The tokens, whether it's Bitcoin or any other, are the reward or incentive mechanism to secure that database. And I see a huge need, particularly in the realm of cybersecurity, for moving to that style database across the board. So any centralized database that you can think of, you know, or transactional style database, I think ultimately at the end of the day, and we're looking out decades here, will be recast in the form of a blockchain style database. And instead of having lots of companies integrating via what we now know as APIs, they'll be integrating with each other over blockchains. And maybe you don't even need the companies in the first place.
You know, and also, I mean, we're not a payments company. We're not a crypto asset. But people are using the blockchain, Bitcoin specifically in our case, as a trust anchor for things that are important to their business. Just yesterday, Microsoft released a Chainpoint Logic App connector, and something for Microsoft Flow, that allows you to create easily a Chainpoint proof inside these workflow applications. Now, the people who are using this, they probably don't care that much about Bitcoin or crypto or anything else. They're just looking for a better data integrity and a better time.
I would say that while there are a lot of different use cases for blockchain, such as like timestamping, kind of looking at as another database, I don't know that we're actually going to see broad mass adoption and visibility where you we start changing the rhetoric where people don't dismiss it. I don't think we're going to see that if that's its pure use case. So right now, I think that what people are dismissing is not that it has value and it will increase in value and that I should keep an eye on it, but they're dismissing, are we actually going to use it on day-to-day operations? And there's no secret that we have scalability that we have to solve. That's a whole other panel all on its own. But to answer the question of how do we deal with it as CEOs of companies, one of the things that has been and continues to be a challenge is the fact that we don't really know what will work. And we're having to be much, much more agile than I think companies in other industries, where we have to change, we have to deal with tools that are incredibly, incredibly young and barely working to be able to adapt to some of the changes, whether it be new currencies, new protocols. And it's definitely not, you know, a C for the weak. It is, you know, you've got to have developers that are willing to really, really step outside of the comfort zone, people that like that, versus the ones that are like, you know, I've been doing this language and this stack for this many years, I want to stick with that. So how do we deal with it? Bring on people that are really, really willing to deal with the unstable nature of it. And then as well as, you know, why are people dismissing it? It's because we're still far from being able to solve and know what is the solution to scaling and getting adoption on an actual use case and transitioning from that speculative era to the utility era.
So all of your companies are established to varying degrees, but some of you have been in the space for a very long time. What are some common mistakes you've identified with other crypto-related businesses that cause them to fail?
How much time you got?
Yeah, I was about to. I'll say one really quickly. So a lot of people tried to create entirely new platforms that require software developers to learn not just a new language and technology stack, but a new paradigm. I think we haven't seen a lot of adoption for those new technologies because it just requires people to think differently. And there's not necessarily a clear advantage to its using some of these types of private blockchain and other types of systems that's emerged yet. So I think one of the mistakes that people made was trying to, instead of take the existing software in the world and make it better with some of this technology, they tried to basically create something whole cloth from scratch and thinking that people would move over, and there really wasn't a compelling reason to do so.
Yeah, there's definitely some ignorance of prior art that I think contributes to that for sure.
I would say a lot of companies are stretching for use cases that the market's not going to be ready for a decade or more. And so they're good use cases, but they're just too early, and they're going to run out of gas.
There's also some incredible regulatory headwinds. There's companies who are trying to do things in this space, and if you're in the .com era with websites, we weren't really having those sorts of problems. But there's a lot of second guessing and a lot of anything from the New York Bit license, and if you're a payments processor, if anything that involves money is high friction. And to be in an industry where innovation is around value transfer, there's going to be high regulatory friction. So I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, and I was going to start to say something similar, but maybe from a technology perspective, which is like, Paul talked about these like really nascent tools that we're all using to build, and we're like just kind of like building the airplane as we're flying, and we are dealing with financial transactions, and there's like nothing more sensitive than that, and like privacy, personal information, and people are making mistakes because these companies are not. They're not fully vetted because they raise their money through an ICO rather than through like a accredited investor that maybe does due diligence. They're using these tools that are just like invented. and then you're turning around and losing serious amounts of money for people on accident, basically. That's you're talking about people's lives, their livelihoods, that's just a recipe for disaster.
So some of you already touched on widespread adoption and changing the way databases work. Every technology has trade-offs, and how you incorporate them really can make or break your business model. So what facets of crypto have you used to your advantage, and what are you sacrificing for those advantages in your business?
I would say we've taken advantage of network effect. At BitPay, we wanted to build a payments platform, but Bitcoin already does payments, right? You don't need BitPay to do a payment. You just move money wallet to wallet. But we wanted to, we felt like that there would be all these businesses that spring up around this common platform, and we could take advantage of that and be a part of that. And so we always felt like, we didn't want to be creating another proprietary, closed payment system, tapping in an open network and take advantage. But the drawback is, you have lots of competitors and you have lots of, just a big ecosystem, communities of people that all have their different agendas that you have to work with.
It could be hard to navigate.
Just one advantage to us is that there's an economic incentive for the Bitcoin blockchain to persist. And so there are companies that do what we've done prior to Bitcoin existing. But they always had to do things like publish information in newspapers, which isn't very convenient to verify, or being able to maintain a federated network of servers around the globe to be able to process a transaction. So we were able to benefit greatly from the security and the economic incentive for blockchain to persist, and our customers can benefit for that. And we happen to be in a period of time right now where the transaction fees are low enough where that is economically viable. But as we saw in December of 2017, it got quite expensive. So the trade-off for us is a little bit that there's a risk that long-term the cost to actually publish a transaction on Bitcoin could get so high that it presents an obstacle to it.
So what we target is the fact that we're actually able to build a financial application that is 100% pure software. And that's a fairly unique thing that only came about first with Bitcoin and then other cryptocurrencies. We can build an app that can be put in the hands of millions of people to transact digital value and do very, very little and spend very little on legal and regulatory compliance. And that's, in effect, the big advantage of both cryptocurrency and the model that we try to choose. We try to choose to be a software company. We don't offer exchange services directly through our company. We partner with other companies. And so in that sense, by choosing the specific model and focusing it obviously around crypto, because there's no really other option, otherwise you are going to be heavily regulated, we can kind of build this, our goal is to build a global brand around offering these services in almost all parts of the world as simply a software company. Now, of course, the trade-off is, because it costs less to do that, and we don't have to do a lot of the compliance, there's going to be more competitors. But that's what I foresee is what crypto will bring, is I never had the pipe dream of us being the next Google or Facebook. Because if crypto achieves its actual goal, you can't have only 3 or 4 companies that control the entire ecosystem. You'll have 100. And so we'd love to be one of those 100, but at the same time, it won't be that big. We'll be big enough, it'll make me happy, make my family happy, and our investors happy. But that competitive landscape will be much richer than it is in the current financial system, and I'm okay with that.
So how has the maturing regulatory landscape changed what businesses people are investing in crypto?
It's changed a lot in the past year, I would say. So there's a lot of the deal flow activity that's in token sales, ICOs is way down. Security tokens is a new area of interest. But I mean, overall, the activity from the investor side is still relatively high compared historically. So if you have a good team and a good product and a promising future, your chances of being able to raise venture capital if you want are still probably pretty good. So we did see a lot of changes with the bubble with and a lot of that was just deflated by regulatory there wasn't really any new laws that came out, but just announcements, guidance from the SEC.
Maybe a little bit of disillusionment to people investing.
Yeah, I think that's it. ICOs. I mean, they're kind of, at least as far as the United States is, they're kind of dead, aren't they?
Sort of leads into the next question. So there's some inherent volatility just with crypto. It's something you're going to have to manage if you're running a service based on it. What are some tools you've used to mitigate risk to both you and your customers?
I mean, in our case, so we have, people are creating listings to sell services or products and things like that. Like if they're selling a T-shirt, they obviously don't want to make $10 today and then $4 tomorrow and then $30 the next day, right? So we create kind of a pegging mechanism so that they can price all their things in their local currency, keeps things stable for them. But it's still a challenge because you have situations, for instance, where someone will pay what's $15 today to the merchant, and then it takes them some time to ship the goods, and then by the time the person releases the money to him, it's either way up or it's way down. And you can create weird incentives where people stalemate. Like the merchant will be like, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to cancel the order. And then that becomes a bad experience for your users. And then it just keeps going. And these are the kinds of weird, difficult challenges and user experience issues that we are kind of running across as an industry. This is we're trying to replicate the seamless, decades-long, perfectly crafted experience on all these other centralized platforms in a decentralized way. It doesn't work the same way. So, you have to come up with clever ways to accommodate for things like volatility.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been a big value proposition for BitPay, since we started the company. Probably 93 to 95% of our settlements to our customers are done in some fiat currency, not in Bitcoin Cash. And interestingly enough, that's about what it was in 2011, and that's about what it is today. The businesses that are on our platform, they see the value in having a fast payment, having a low-cost payment when they compare it to MasterCard and Visa. They see the value in the lack of chargebacks, being able to reach safely, sell products to an international audience. They see all those values, but their accountants' heads explode if you tell them you're going to put cryptocurrency on their balance sheet. And I know that because our accountants' heads explode. But that we just if you're a customer of BitPay, you can sell your products for a Bitcoin payment, but they don't ever have to touch the Bitcoin. They don't ever have to take it onto their balance sheet. and consequently, they're not exposed or impacted by the volatility. And by the way, I think the volatility is going to be there. I mean, Bitcoin and these native tokens that power blockchain, they are kind of like a digital commodity. You know, nobody can adjust the supply of them. Even when you compare it with gold, right? We can dig up more gold when the price of gold goes up and bring more supply onto the market. You can't do that with crypto. So I think the volatility is going to be with us for a long time, if not forever. Maybe not to this extreme, but it will be enough that people are going to want to find solutions to the volatility when it comes to payments.
So with respect to volatility, I'll kind of tackle out on two fronts. One, you asked about how do we deal with that for our users. Well, admittedly, we are kind of in the speculative phase. So our users are using wallets and acquiring crypto for its volatility. Some of them are actually using to make purchases, but by and large, we speculate that most people are in it for speculation. So the only thing we can offer is basically ability for people to quickly hedge into fiat or stable coins, which we do offer. People can go right into DAI with a couple clicks. From the viewpoint of the company, I think that's one thing a lot of companies have to deal with is if we have any amount of cryptocurrency on the balance sheet, how do we deal with its volatility as a company? One of the things that I've been proposing for a while is that one of the ways to deal with volatility is to actually start to make short and medium and slowly longer term contracts where you quote things in cryptocurrency. So as an example, if we have some amount of cryptocurrency that we hold, if we actually quote someone, say, a 2-week job, maybe a contractor, and say that that's going to be in a specific amount of Bitcoin, well, that effectively is somewhat hedging our risk. And as those contracts become longer and longer, it goes from 2 weeks to 2 months, potentially a year. We actually had a 4-year Bitcoin option that we offered an employee. And it was small at the time we offered it, became very big at the time it got paid out. But that allowed us to take a certain amount of Bitcoin and know we have a certain value in locking in an employee with that. And also drives his interest in the increase in value. So, the US dollar is incredibly, incredibly stable in the world, but there's billions of dollars of very long-term contracts that motivate it to be stable. Both sides of the party kind of don't want it to move a whole lot. I think that's the piece that long-term will help contribute to the stability of any currency. Right now, us quoting things in dollars, crypto is just simply a payment rail. You quote things in crypto, now both sides have a financial interest in some aspect of keeping it stable, and they tug against each other to achieve that stability. And I think that's what will achieve it. And we're experimenting with using that within the company ourselves since we have crypto.
As an operator, there's a few things that the volatility provides some complexities for your business. So we do thousands of Bitcoin transactions every year, and we need to calculate a capital gain or loss on a basis for each one of those interests. So it makes accounting a little bit more complicated. There's a different kind of volatility that I think impacts us, which is the risk of things like Bitcoin forks. So it's not necessarily price volatility, but it's another uncertain aspect of the business. When the Bitcoin Cash fork happened, there was some real concern amongst our customers, like, is the security of Bitcoin network going to be dramatically affected? If you're making a SaaS application or something like that, you don't worry about the internet splitting in two. But that's something that we have to worry about in our industry.
What fundamental properties do you think are essential to long-term success in the crypto industry?
There's many different reasons why people like crypto and a lot of ideology that's going into the different parts of crypto, whether it be kind of global accessibility, whether it be kind of what you call sound money or limited known inflation, ownership of money. Fundamentally, I think the one key thing that at least I latch onto that's important for crypto's future is non-custodial ownership of money. I think that if that goes away, at least if that gets 51% attacked, meaning that in an era where we're actually using crypto, not just speculating on, but actually using it, if in that era most of crypto is custodially held, I think all of its actual key benefits will be lost. I haven't found one that I couldn't argue against. So that to me is the most important thing, and how we achieve that with creative tools and services that allow people to still hold, or at least partially. I think the future is a kind of a partial custodian model where you might trust other entities, but not with all of the funds, but instead with a key in like a multi-sig scenario. That future I could see and still have the true value of crypto, but definitely ownership of keys. Otherwise, we lose all of the benefits.
I've often thought that about the only thing that really was essential was the ability to discern a cryptographic signature on a transaction. To discern a cryptographic signature, which kind of goes hand in hand with ownership of keys. But I think, if we ever lost that, obviously, not only Bitcoin would break, but would break. But I think that's the essence of what all this stuff is.
I would say, I know those are kind of some technical answers, I guess, somewhat. From a business perspective, I think I think the three of us have probably been around for quite a long time in the space together, and you're a little bit newer, but still the same applies, which is resiliency, is being able to survive these ups and downs. We've gone from the BitPay bull, or what was it, the Bitcoin bull, and we've seen all that. We've seen the ICOs, and all this stuff comes and goes, and we see companies get bigger, and they get smaller, and they get bigger, and they get smaller, and the most important part is that we keep our eyes on the vision that we set forth when we try to start creating these companies and projects and try to fulfill them, because it's going to take a long time. We're not going to completely destroy the banking system in 4 years. It's just it's not going to happen. So it's staying focused. And what?
Why so pessimistic?
Really?
At least 5 years.
Well, it's already past 4 years, so that's what I was saying. It's already been more than 4 years.
Four more.
4 more years. Okay, fine. That's fair. So 14 years. But yeah, no, I think resiliency is a huge key to this. I remember a couple years ago at one of these smaller summits when there was only 10 or 20 people, I think Naval was the most important thing that you guys will ever do as leaders is just keep your thing in business. You have enough money to survive. So, and it goes for ICOs. $100 million may seem like a lot, but if you're pissing it away with a high burn rate and not being responsible, it's going to go away too.
So I would say that one of the things that's really important and is encouraging is that people are having less of an ideological focus on the technology and more of a focus on selling things that are actually, or making things that are actually useful. And when we launched Tyrion as a software application in 2015, we were one of the few actual complete, nice user interface applications that were available at that time. And now there's lots of great looking wallets and more product design people and people having empathy for actual users as opposed to trying to make something really cryptographically secure so they can destroy the bankers in 20 years.
What's 20 years?
Well, I'm not on the Brian Hoffman timetable, so.
Brian Hoffman years.
Any final thoughts before we open it up to questioning?
People who organize this conference have done a fantastic job. So I think we should give them a vote.
Yep.
Thank you, Tab.
Here.
No final thoughts?
Hopefully it was a great conference, and hopefully it'll be back next year and get even bigger.
Okay. I guess we can open it up to questioning now. I think that gentleman in the back was the first to raise his hand. He's got a mic.
So I think it's safe to say there's mentality around this space and some of the different tokens and coins. And as a business, I'm sure you have to deal with that. I think Wayne might be the only Bitcoin maximalist on here as far as the way the business is run. But how do you deal with just these other altcoins that want your support, want your business to, be a supporting actor for them?
That's tough because everybody wants your company to support their blockchain. I think we try to look at it just from a market demand and a technology perspective. And during the BSV BCH split, we had both sides there trying to do everything they could to convince us to go with their part of that split. And I just said, we run Bitcoin ABC, and that's not changing. So, end of story for now. We'll pay attention to how the market evolves and develops, but we're not changing anything at this moment. It's tough though because over the years, the Dogecoin fanatics came after us, the Litecoin fanatics came after us. They all try to bend social media to create this perception that their coin is the one, is the next one, the one that's going to beat Bitcoin. and therefore you should accept it. But 95% of our payments are done in Bitcoin.
I mean, my perspective is that, and we're a little bit different because we're not really like we're more focused on the marketplace aspect than certainly the payment rail. So we're not that concerned with it from a philosophical standpoint. Like we don't have anything against any certain coin or whatever, but it does require some level of like integration and understanding those technologies and all the risks that you bring on. So every new coin that you incorporate into your business, it's like there's nuances in each of those. Like even if they're just forks of Bitcoin, you know, there's still challenges in each one of those, and then you have to you support those customers, and you have to like account for forks. And I mean, like we had a situation where Zcash like had their little vulnerability, they like just upgraded, and then all of a sudden our nodes are like, it stopped working. And you're like, what do you do? So all your Zcash customers are pissed off. So it's definitely a lot of risk to accept additional currencies, and that's probably why companies like Binance charge so damn much to incorporate new coins, because they have to take that on.
So we don't have as big of a challenge as like BitPay would in being able to support another currency, because there's some aspect of liquidity that you have to deal with as an exchange provider. We're more purely technology, so we can incorporate more assets, more blockchains. But to us, what we look for, almost the same as what Stephen said, is market demand, and as well as the intersection of what the effort is on the technology and engineering side. But we like to say that there is some a bigger challenge in some of the coins that are offering some unique value add to the ecosystem. So we were one of the few wallets and SDK platforms to incorporate Monero, and a lot of people really appreciated that because it is a definitely more challenging currency to support. But we saw that it was bringing something unique, which was privacy by default. There's many privacy-based coins, but almost none that are on by default. So chains that are offering something unique, something that while we don't know what the end result will be, what will succeed, they're actually making a concerned effort to try something different in their model, and that bodes highly for us for at least that attempt. And while that's harder for us, especially with the small engineering team that we have, that brings higher value to us to say that we're incorporating a chain that's making some significantly different attempt at solving some of the problems in the ecosystem.
Hey guys, sorry. You guys have been in the space for a long time, been running like legitimate businesses in the space for a long time. I was wondering what it's been like on the funding, raising money side, particularly the differences from like 2012, 2013 to potentially raising money today, if you guys have any time in the last couple of years. What have been the challenges? What are the differences in raising money from people, Bitcoin less than 3-4 years old?
I mean, I'll tell our story, but when we founded the company, there were no ICOs, obviously, and I think that the biggest crowdfunding effort was like Dark Wallet for $50K, which is like you can't start a business on that with like legitimate engineers and stuff. And so venture was our only option, and they were very excited about that and funding us. As we got closer to this ICO like incline, the investors that we had, which are like pretty, notable investors, we have like Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square, they started very quickly changing their tune and is heavily pushing us and encouraging us to consider the ICO model and to do token and to sale. And actually, we're the only ones in Andreessen's crypto portfolio that didn't do an ICO. I mean, let's see, Blockstack did 50 million, Protocol Labs did 250 million, Kik. With Kin, I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and we were the only ones who didn't do it. So it became an intensely frustrating experience to raise our Series A early last year when we were basically telling them, like, hell no, we're not doing a sale. So that was a very tough round. Our conversations now are different again, and they're like, well, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea, so it just fluctuates, but you have to stay the course and you have to stay focused on like what your principles are and don't just do things because people tell you or the market looks like it's like frothy. Like do what's right for your company.
Okay.
Just comment, I raised a seed round for Tyrion back in 2015. And even though the market was down, kind of felt a little bit like this at the time, it was not a very difficult process for us. Every time you raise money for a business is difficult, but relative to pitching and rejections and things like that, we were able to close a round relatively quickly because we had something that people could see and they were actually using and they could sign up for. And I think that if you're in that position today, if you build something, you're not going to get funding on an idea anymore nowadays. If you have something that's built and you have a good team and you have a little bit of traction, then you're gonna find investors that are probably interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, we've been through 3 rounds of funding, a seed round and then a Series A and Series B. And it's funny you talk about the ICOs because we got the same pressure from a couple of investors that wanted us to do an ICO. I'm glad we didn't because looking back on that, I'm glad we didn't for the obvious reasons, right? But the less obvious reasons are that once you've done an ICO, there are all sorts of questions about what's the liability there that you have to those holders of your token, and how do you value that? So if you're going to do later rounds of funding, that becomes a very complex question to answer. But at the seed round, we raised $2.7 million in our seed round, and that was, we were one of the first companies to raise money. And at that time, you had venture capitalists that were starting to get very excited about Bitcoin and about the space, and there were like 5 companies they could invest in. And so they were practically dragging other entrepreneurs that had been successful and trying to shake them and get them to start a Bitcoin company of some kind. So that was pretty easy. The Series A was pretty easy. That didn't take too long. Series B took a little longer than we thought, but not for the reasons, not for anything external. It was actually because of the price of Bitcoin doing what it was doing, because we brought one investor in to lead the round, and then like a month later, the price of Bitcoin did what it's doing, and we're selling it too cheap. And so that caused a delay in that. But today, I would imagine, so we try to time those funding rounds when the market's hot, of course. And so you have to think about that. You have to think about when's the right time to go to the market and raise funds. Right now, it's probably, I would imagine, a little difficult. But it certainly wasn't difficult at the end of 2017 when we did our B.
Yeah, we were probably the smallest funded of all the companies here on stage. And so for us, it's been really trying to run lean. We've kind of gone through, other than an ICO, we definitely did not do an ICO, but we've exercised a lot of the different options from angels to VCs to actual equity crowdfunding. And we were, I think, the first crypto company to do an actual registered equity crowdfund. And actually, BitPay kind of helped out with that. We connected them with the equity crowdfunding portal to do that. And I think that is an option for some companies. We kind of asked ourselves, is an ICO proper for our product? And for some products it is, and for some products it's not. And we kind of said to ourselves, we've got 3 choices with an ICO. You kind of either have a product that does fit, great, or you have a product that doesn't fit and you hinder the product. You make it worse by requiring a token inside of the product. Or 3, you kind of just really make it an equity and you go to jail. And we didn't really want to exercise any of those. And so we decided that just conventional funding was what we would go down the path of doing. And hence we were able to push out an SDK and a platform that other people can use without the friction of an additional token, because there's already other tokens on the market. But once again, I don't just kind of laugh at the ICOs as being completely pointless. I think if you are building a product, potentially a dApp that can have security added to it via a token, then shoot for it. We partner with those dApps, and I think they are a part of the future of our technology. So use it where you can. Otherwise, yeah, it definitely can be a little bit tougher with VCs and angels, but luckily there are some options that can also bring the crowd in, Reg A Plus and Title III offerings, some of which we've exercised and have been successful with.
Thanks for all the information you've given us. I think all of your stories are inspiring. I was looking toward, one of you guys hinted on the stage about whether a company would be necessary in the future. So looking at the evolution of blockchain and moving into the idea of decentralized organizations, DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, how do you guys see that playing out? How do your roles play out in that future if it were to happen to where one corporation doesn't have complete, totalitarian control over their operations, but it's more of a consensus mechanism, and it's less of a dictatorial kind of role that you play in your company, but more of a custodial role in your company? Are you all ready to transition to that model, and do you think that will be the way of the future? Are you optimistic about it, or? Or
You guys
other-
feel like dictators of your company? I sure as don't. Just very briefly, I'm skeptical about the future of things like DAOs. I think companies and any kind of organization is a social structure that involves people. You know, the relationships that I have with all the people on our team and how we interact with each other, it's not transactional. We're friends, we're brothers in arms, we got a mission that we're on. And you just, if you're doing something that is abstracted through something like a DAO, maybe there's different types of economic activity or organizational activity that can happen through that, but I seriously doubt that it's going to, in the near future, be something where you go from zero to having an innovative new product with product market fit. I just don't see how it happens.
I'll take the opposite side of that. I think it's inevitable. DAOs are inevitable. They will happen. It may take a long time. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm about them, but we've got a long way to go before they become a practical reality. But I spend a lot of time thinking about how we convert BitPay the company into BitPay the blockchain, and how we can, and that's not just words. We're actively trying to write code and figure out how to do that. And it actually, the genesis of that idea was came from a security-related need, the need to build a back office that's much more hardened than traditional architecture. The solution is a blockchain. Convert BitPay into a blockchain is what I would like to do eventually.
I'll take a third option, which is more of a hybrid approach. I think centralization brings way too much efficiency and optimization to like business processes and the way that things operate for it to just go away and just move into like a fully decentralized model, in my opinion. I think there will always be organizations like companies that provide kind of services at the edge that they can be very optimized, very specific to certain niches. And I think at the lower level, like we were talking about, like the whole payment ecosystem, all that stuff, I think will probably start to move into more of these like decentralized autonomous organizations that are just managing like the infrastructure piece of all this. But at the top, I think there will still be lots of like little companies and services. We may see the destruction of like the massive corporation, the mega corporation. Those may be like now like DAOs, but I still think like small businesses and things like that will always reside around all of that.
Well, I mean, if you look at Bitcoin, it's a protocol for people to coordinate and communicate with each other, and in a sense, it is a DAO. I think all you're really talking about is moving what now exists as a legal construct and turning that into something that operates on a blockchain with actors engaging with one another on that blockchain. So I don't think there's anything earth-shattering about it. I think it'll happen in time.
But do you think like do you like believe like the code is law kind of thing concept?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really like which side of that argument do you sit on? Like, do you believe that code is law and that like literally math and code can just supplant all of like human interaction and all this stuff in terms of like legal stuff? I think there's still like some human element that needs to exist in that, and for that reason, I'm like optimistic but skeptical that it can completely supplant all of that. That's all.
Yeah, I tend to be skeptical of the full corporate DAO replacing an actual operating agreement. If any of you have formed a company and read kind of the operating agreement, what it takes, and all of the different corner cases, if you try to convert all of those little corner cases into code and realize that that is also code that can't be mutated in a smart contract, you realize how much trust and how correct you have to get it from the very, very start. And just like Brian said, we're the soft and squishy of our world. Right? We're not the hard black and white. Even the most engineering-minded people are not black and white. Like I was an engineer by trade as a kid. I was the type of person that got the high math SAT and really poor English, and so I wasn't the reader type and the philosophical type. But in everything that I talk about as of late, it's about finding the balance and the middle ground, and realize that we're humans interacting with technology. And so I feel like the DAO existence will be for very limited uses. Just like Steven said, a multi-sig contract is a mini DAO. But how big can that get? Can that encompass an entire organization with vice presidents in various departments, engineering and whatnot, and encompass all of the agreements that we'd normally make? I'm a bit skeptical of that. Can it replace maybe a small organization? Maybe, I've given the example of an HOA, a homeowners association. Potentially some aspects of that. Maybe a meetup group. where you just simply need a little bit of funds deposited into the group and people vote on how to spend it. So on a small basis, yes, I think it can replace some of these weird agreements we don't normally bother to write. They're just kind of handshake agreements. But from the viewpoint of a fairly large organization, when I say large, even 20 people starts to become complicated when there's more complex governance, and putting that from paper to a smart contract both becomes inefficient and tricky.
I mean, can you imagine a situation where like you bought your car through like a DAO, and then like it hits some line of code that was screwed up and wasn't audited properly, and they like come and take your car, and they go, "Well, code is law, tough shit." You know, like, I mean, like, there's no recourse there, right? And so I think like those scenarios, I think people will just humanly protest or whatever. Like there will be violence if that happens. And so I don't know how we solve that problem. I don't know if we can. But right now, that just seems like a very scary outcome with our current situation.
I feel like the solution will be in these smart contracts. You're going to end up having just people vote on something to be able to make that decision, but it just kind of ends up looking like a regular contract anyway. And so you end up replacing all of that soft and squishiness, you know, that you'd have in a paper contract with a whole bunch of soft and squishiness inside of a smart contract. And then what are you really gaining at the end? And so, yeah, I'm skeptical of it fully replacing, but I think different pockets of organizations might be able to be fully replaced, and small organizations can. But as it grows, it becomes a pretty exponentially harder problem to solve.
What's up, party people? How you doing, guys? Yeah, so I would actually like to ask each of you to what degree the zealotry online is impacting your business, and what can or should be done about that?
We should meet in real life. That's what we got to do. Face to face. I want to smell all of you. That solves all problems. You just can't do that on Twitter. You can't smell me. I can't smell you. Love is in the air.
I'll give a little anecdote from this past week. So I was at Satoshi Roundtable, and Saifedean, who is a Bitcoin maximalist, he wrote
Humble brag.
The Bitcoin Standard.
Humble brag. Satoshi Roundtable, huh?
What? You were there?
I didn't brag about it, though.
I was at an event, okay? And Saifedean, he's just famous for blocking people on Twitter. He has like 10,000 people he says that he's blocked on his Twitter list. And
I'm one of them.
And I'm one of them.
And so am I.
Yeah, and I have no idea why, but he wanted to sit at the breakfast table next to us, and I told him that he couldn't have the seat unless he unblocked me from Twitter. And we had a laugh about it and a short conversation, and he's like, I don't even know why I blocked you. You're like a reasonable guy. He's like, I think it was that Junseth, Jason Seibert thing. I just blocked everybody in that thread. And he unblocked me. But, he having that human interaction, like Paul said, yeah, I was a part of a blacklist in his mind, I guess, a little bit. But having that human interaction allowed us to be able to sort of overcome that. You can't do that en masse because with Twitter and the social environment. I think that the Bitcoin divorce is over, and that we're still sort of like feeling some of the ramifications from the divorce. But as we move forward, I think that the people who want to be religious, ideological zealots will have their opportunity to have their own successful technology, and it'll be over here in this corner or over here in this corner. But they're not going to be fighting over the destiny of Bitcoin anymore.
I mean, I would say like it's definitely affected us in a hardcore way. I mean, but we've been dealing with this from the beginning. I mean, you, Chris, you dedicated an entire podcast to how crappy we were. I mean, and now we say, hey, at conferences. So, I mean, I think time can change things. So, but the biggest problem I have with the zealotry thing is that I think it just doesn't seem all that productive, to be honest. I mean, one of the main reasons why I got into this space is because I think the technology is so fascinating and it's like empowering for people. And to sit around and like break people down because they don't agree with your ideas, I think in person, most of these people are not even confident enough to like maintain that horrible attitude towards you. They break down. But like, why does it have to come to that? Like, why do we have like one personality online where we're like this hardcore maximalist or whatever, and then in real life we're like drinking beers and hanging out? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. So if you want to have a substantial debate about the merits of what we're doing versus something else, that's fine, and I really don't care. I mean, I it was watching the Daniel Krowitz talk like yesterday, and everybody was kind of like, zinging him or whatever in the Q&A, and I'm like, well, it's funny, but I mean, like, what are we drawing out of that? Like, what value are we getting out of just like criticizing somebody? I think we have like a really unique ecosystem with like tons of different coins and ideas, and yes, there are scammers, and yes, there are like charlatans, and we can call those people out, but like call out their actions. Like, let's just not like insult people, because they don't agree with you.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I'm interested. Oh, can I go?
There he is. Okay.
Sorry, we're going to make this the final question,
Yeah.
okay? Thank you.
As CEOs of ideologically rooted companies, when you're faced with a business decision and there's conflicting reasons such as one route can make my business more money, but one decision is maybe better for the ideological framework you're trying to advance, how do you help weigh those two competing things? And how do you make a decision?
It's almost never that clear. It's almost never like this way will make me money and this way is more ideologically pure. So that's kind of at least in my experience, it's kind of a false question. I think you always want to do something that's right. You never really know. There's a lot of risk involved with an early stage company of what's going to be the best move for your business. So you just want to have values as a company, and you want to be able to try to stick to those values and make the best decision that you can.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of whether we're ideologically rooted or not. I mean, I got into this. I can tell you why I got into it. I got into it because I read a computer science white paper, and I'm a computer scientist, and I had been thinking about this problem domain going back to the Digicash days in the 1990s, and I got very excited about it, and I was ready to start another company. And that's what we did, and I try to keep BitPay focused on, and everybody at BitPay focused on our task, which is to serve our customers and to be great at doing that. And not get wrapped up into either the Twitter wars or whatever, and the
People
the
certainly
ideological
tried to
debates.
drag you into Twitter wars.
What's that?
I said people certainly tried to drag you guys into Twitter wars.
All the time. It happens every day, but we got code to write.
Yeah. Our customers, by and large, don't care about what happens or even know what happens with all the zealotry and the Twitter stuff. As long as you make something that's useful and it's easy for them to use, then they'll use it. And that's, if you just stay focused on that, then you'll be right most of the time.
I think what you were trying to hit on is like, it's just like, that's all entertainment. I mean, it's just noise in the space. You either like choose to participate and waste your time, or you have to look at it as entertainment, and that's just part of your life. I mean, I choose to participate in a lot of this stuff, but I mean, is it worth it in the end? I don't know. Maybe it's not. A lot of people just ignore it and build code. But
we have fun with it too. Like you make funny videos. I made the Wayne Chain thing. It's fun.
Yeah, because this ecosystem is so damn weird. Like everybody's so weird. Like there's so many personalities and like strangeness in it. But that's what's making it so damn unique and like special. You can't have one without the other. I don't think. I love it.
Yeah, at some point the industry just kind of has to go outside of ideology. I think everyone at our company is ideologically strong, although we disagree on many different facets. So I think the ideology kind of brings you into the industry, but from then on, after you're there and your head's down and just working, you're just trying to build what you think people are going to want at that point. And you will make compromises, there's no question about it. A lot of people I've talked to, especially in the purest cryptocurrency space or in the cryptography space, will claim like the internet was a total failure. Right, it didn't achieve its ideological goal, and there were a lot of compromises. Absolutely, there were. SSL was a compromise, but it achieved a lot of goals. And so our take is we're going to find some middle ground. We'll have some ideology going into it. We'll compromise in some ways, but if we're able to build something that a lot of people, billions of people use, then we've succeeded. And as I'd mentioned, like we've got like one metric that I look at, which is do people own their funds, and from then on, after that. Cryptocurrency will definitely achieve at least some of the goals that it was intended for, if not all of them, and we'll be in a better place. Just like we're in a better place post-internet than we were pre-internet. So,
the Federal Reserve is just running old code.
It's worse than COBOL.
It's time for an upgrade.
Any closing thoughts? All right. Thanks, guys. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists?